Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Central Texas Association Black Social Workers monthly get-together, monthly meeting. Thank you so much for joining in today. If you are new, please use the chat feature to introduce yourself. Let us know your name and where you're from. And if you want to stay posted on what's going on with Central Texas Association of Black Social Workers, definitely leave your email in the chat as well. Thank you so much for joining us. I am Dr. Cherie Chevelle, the president of the Central Texas Association of Black Social Workers, and two of our officers are on the line today. We have Jamie McKinney, who is our secretary. Hi, Jamie.
Good morning, everybody.
And we have Marie Hines, who is our chair of I always forget how to pronounce your, help me, Marie, because I always stump it up.
With the steering committee, social media, PR.
Thank you. I do that all the time. I don't know why, but yeah, Marie is our marketing and PR as well as our steering committee chair. So welcome to Marie and Jamie, and welcome to you, Tim. Thank you so much for coming on and joining with us today. We're so glad to have you. Today's discussion is on the 9 dimensions of wellness, and I am so excited to have our guest presenter with us today, Alyssa Petty, and I am going to introduce her to our meeting session so that you can become acquainted with her before we actually get started in our discussion for today. Alyssa Petty is a certified health education specialist who enjoys working with college students to help them achieve overall wellness through education. She thrives in working closely with students from diverse backgrounds, promoting peer health education and advising student health organizations. Currently, she serves as the Assistant Director of Wellness at Baylor University, overseeing programs that focus on prevention and developing healthy habits. While at Baylor, she serves on various committees for her department, serves as the secretary for the Baylor Black Faculty and Staff Association, and volunteers with my self-support group. Alyssa holds a Master's of Science degree from Texas Women's University in Health Science, focusing on higher education. On a personal note, Alyssa is a native of Fort Worth and has a big heart for serving others. In her downtime, she enjoys trying new foods and sweet treats with friends and family. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Alyssa Petty. Yay. Hi, Alyssa.
Hello there. Thank you so much, Dr. Chevelle.
Oh, absolutely. You are welcome. I'm so glad that you have joined us, and I'm excited to hear what you have to share with us today. So without further delay, Alyssa Petty, please take the virtual platform.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And if I could just be, oh, there we go. And I'm going to showcase that. Let me just get set up. Okay, can y'all see the actual PowerPoint and not my PowerPoint notes? Good, I can't see. Okay, perfect, thank y'all. So thank you again so much to the Central Texas Association of Black Social Workers. I do not take this request lightly. I'm so honored that y'all chose me to come and speak today and facilitate our conversation. There are a lot of great dynamic women on this call, and I'm excited, and men, pardon me. I'm excited to join in all the fun that I've heard so much about. And so today we're going to dive into the 9 dimensions of wellness in the Black community. So Black Americans' social standing in the United States has been shaped by a long history of racism and laws, policies, practices that has built racial institutions and created just interesting inequalities for us. And we can all name the different barriers and injustices that we deal with from day to day that benefit our wellness. And so those are some of the things that we're going to talk about, benefit and also put us at a disadvantage. So just a FYI, for your information, my opinions are my own. I do work at an institution, but my opinions and ideas do not represent that institution. I love my job. I want to keep my job. And so I just thought that it would be fair to state. Your participation is appreciated. I love dialogue. Can be very informal. If you have anything you want to add, you can definitely add that through the chat or unmute yourself when prompted to. We learn together. So I am on here with some dynamic people. I study things in the field of public health. Many of you are licensed clinical social workers or licensed master social workers, and you have a lot to discuss. So if we get to environmental health and we're talking about environmental racism, and you did your thesis or dissertation on environmental racism, and you're like, hey, Alyssa, you're not giving enough justice. Again, feel free to chat in extra commentary in the chat, or when prompted to, you can always add into that information if you want to add more to that. I am not offended if you have more information or even a correction. And then lastly, just be present and have fun. Just being present, paying attention to what's going on. And it's Saturday and I have you for the next couple minutes. So let's just have fun as we talk about this topic. So if any of you are like me, I always like to know, where are we going? What's the point of this? So we're first going to discuss what is wellness, and then we're going to talk about why this conversation is crucial for Black America. We're going to do an overview as well as a deep dive into the 9 dimensions of wellness as a collective. And then we're going to do individual tips for staying well. And so in order for us to be our best selves as a community and as a collective, we also need to take care of ourselves individually. And then I have some resources that go outside of reading, such as podcasts and the websites you can check out to have your most awesome well self. So let's start off with an easy one. I want each of y'all to think about the healthiest person you know. And this is without saying their name or who they are. Just think about this person. And if possible, either unmute yourself in a little bit or put in the chat the qualities that person possesses that makes them the healthiest person. So the healthiest person you know, and what makes that person healthy. So not who they are, and I'm gonna move the chat box so I can make sure I can see that. Does anybody have any qualities that they can list off? Eating habits, diet. Hello there. So eating habits and diet, that's a good one. Any other qualities we can think of when we think on the healthiest person we know? Activity level. These are all good. Some people might say, yes, not just one. Yep. Dr. Chevelle just jumped straight into the point, which is awesome. Spiritual, physical, mental, emotional, high activity level, emotional wellness, resiliency. These are all great. And like I said, y'all jumped right into it. Typically, when I ask an individual what makes somebody healthy, they go straight to the physical aspects of it. They talk about, oh, well, they eat nothing but vegetables and fruit, and they exercise every day, and they always go to sleep. This person is the healthiest person I know, and very much so. Those are all great qualities to have, but there's a spectrum of things that we should look at. And that brings us to, as Dr. Chevelle was talking about, the various dimensions of wellness. Wellness is more than just the physical aspect. It's intellectual, emotional, social, occupational, financial, environmental, spiritual, as well as cultural. And we're going to go into the definition of all these things deeper as we go into the presentation. But just from looking at the overview of this, what would you say that in the Black community we do very well at? So looking at these various dimensions, what do we have a good strength place at? What do we just do very well at when it comes to these various areas of wellness? Okay, listening, yeah. And that can fall under the social aspect. Spiritual, yep, that's usually a huge one. So listening can fall under a couple of things. It can fall under that emotional, it can fall under that social aspect. Spiritual, that spiritual dimension is big. So let's talk about that a little bit. Wellness is just very broad and dynamic, but at times in Black America, it's put on the back burner. And we're going to discuss some of those barriers in a little bit. So being able to see all the different areas and finding balance. Now, every day, are you going to be 100 on all these dimensions, on intellectual, physical, emotional? Absolutely not. But the key takeaway from this today, if you don't take anything else away, is finding balance in your life to try to incorporate all these things. So why is health and wellness important for the Black community? What are some reasons why we can think of? Now, just wait a second. It creates stability for our youth. That is great, yes. So we're not just thinking about our current generation, but the generations to come. And as we look at the generations to come, we're also setting an example for them. We are exposed to negativity regularly, yes, through our own everyday stressors that every human has, to the ones that come from institutional racism or systematic racism. Any other thoughts about why is health and wellness important for our Black community? These are great. These are awesome. I declare that, first off, because we are human, we need all the same basic rights everyone else does, but they're not always afforded to us, which leads to the next point of the idea that the privilege of wellness. Believe it or not, but wellness is a privilege that everyone cannot attain because of different barriers, because of cost, not having access to certain things, having access to a safe environment, a place of worship, or a place to go to. The privilege of wellness is there for us, but we have to take it. It is important to demonstrate how we want to be treated. Yes, that's another good one, setting boundaries. So wellness is a privilege that we have to take and we have to utilize, but it's not always easy. And the self-care is not given. We must take it for ourselves. I think my institution is great. They offer awesome unmatched benefits for higher education. And this is coming from a woman who worked at a state school for a couple of years, but never have they ever been like, hey, you should just take yourself a self-care week and just take some time off. And just because I have to set boundaries for myself, I have to be intentional to have self-care for myself, and I must take it for myself when able to. And then lastly, radical self-love equals well-being. Again, going on to the third point, when we are able to carve out time for ourselves, love ourselves, pour into our own cup, then we're able to be our best selves for our families, therefore our best selves for the community. What that means for me may look differently from you. If you have children or you have other familial roles, you might have to find a break or exit from those. If you are an individual who is not married or don't have children or pets, you may have a little bit more flexibility, but taking pauses in your career so you're not just working, but making self-care and self-love a priority so that you can take care of yourself and then pour into everyone else. So the first dimension that we're going to dive into is cultural, and I won't death by PowerPoint you can read it for yourself, the definitions, but essentially the idea of understanding your own identity and culture, but then also expanding to other people's. And so there's research done that shows that Black cultural values and practices can potentially bolster and increase psychosocial health in the population. And it's the idea of operating from a strengths perspective instead of a deficit perspective. And so we're able to honor our strengths, understanding our strengths as Black Americans. We can also increase our overall health and wellness. So understanding who we are, understanding where we come from, and then practicing in those things are good to do. And then actively engaging in cultural and community activities. And this is not just for ourselves. Growing and learning about other individuals, other ethnicities and races, about the cultures and traditions that they have, expand our worldview, but also help with our intellectual component. The dimension of wellness for cultural stems from the intellectual dimension area, and we'll talk about intellectual in a minute. But it's the idea that we can expand our own understanding and knowledge of other people by diving into other cultures. And this could just help with longevity of life, quality of life, especially as we get older. Intellectual, and this is the idea of finding things that expand our intellect, whether that be informal or formal education, having educational pursuits, even after you reach your terminal degree. What are you doing to keep yourself stimulated? Are you doing certifications? Are you doing informal things to find education? According to the National Center for Education Statistics, it talks about educational attainment as a collective, as a population, and I believe that was from 2019, was 34.5%. And that was a Black population that had at least an associate's degree. It does not necessarily account for those who go to technical schools, but that's also a trade that we admire and it is needed. And so however you define your educational attainment and however you add to your educational skills is good. Also finding hobbies. I believe this is something as a collective that we do very well, finding things that bring us enjoyment, whether that is with a social group or being by ourselves. Hobbies are something that also give us a place for relieving stress management. It gives us a time to be mindful in other areas. And so finding hobbies, diving into those are great. And then finding other areas to stimulate our mind and support healthy outlet. Leisure reading, when people find time to leisure read, journaling, drawing, and creating, gardening. You can think of a million other things. Anything that keeps you intellectually stimulated and moving can be a great benefit for us. When we talk about physical dimension of wellness, this is usually, when we talk about dimensions of wellness, physical is usually the one that most of us all know very well. And it includes our activity, it includes our diet, as well as the sleep pattern we get. And usually we talk about sleep, people shy away, but sleep is very important and plays a big role in our mental health. It plays a big role in our physical health and so on and so forth. So getting regular physical activity can reduce certain chronic conditions. So we know cardiovascular disease, diabetes, obesity are very high within the Black community. But that doesn't always have to be the case. So we understand the guidelines. We understand what's needed to stay healthy and be healthy. We understand what to eat. We understand what to do. But there still is a high level of physical inactivity. So physical activity levels are significant and lower in Blacks and contributing to higher prevalence of poor health outcomes. The Healthy People 2020 outcomes did show that over the last 10 years, so from 2010 to 2020, that physical activity did increase a little bit among Black Americans, but we're still lacking in some areas. And we're going to discuss some barriers for that in the next couple slides. An increase in Black adults decreasing physical activity. There's other things that can push with our physical aspects, and that's a disruption in health insurance. And so we don't have access to health insurance, that can make it harder to take care of our physical well-being. And then looking at the health disparity in sleep. How many people know someone who either has some form of sleep apnea or insomnia? And you can just raise your hand or thumbs up. So this is very high. A number of other health surveys have shown that similar results, but higher rates of shorter sleep. So Black Americans are not getting enough sleep, but also there's another correlation that shows that Black Americans are getting too much sleep. And we know that anything after 9 hours can be harmful. And this is like on a regular basis. So people should see their healthcare provider when it talks about that. Other things to think about is, when you notice that you're not getting good sleep, and after you realize like, hey, is it my sleep hygiene? You talk about sleep hygiene. Is it the things that you do before you prepare for bed? Like, do you keep your TV on all night? Do you eat really big meals before you go to sleep? Do you try to go to bed stressed? After you've determined that maybe it's not your sleep hygiene and maybe something a little bit more serious, then you should go see your PCP and have those discussions. But not having access to a primary care physician or insurance can make that limiting as well. So let's discuss for a little bit. And usually in person, this is a little differently when you do think, pair, share, because you would pair together. But what are some barriers that keep people from being their most physically well selves? Identifying the barriers.
Finances.
Finances, yep, that's a big one. What else?
Trauma.
And you can unmute or you can put in the chat.
Trauma.
Trauma. Oh, that's a good one. Let's hold on to that one. I want to come back to that one. Trauma, that's good. Let's two more. Education. And one more. So we have finances, we have trauma, education, so lack thereof, health education, health literacy is very important and sometimes not fully taught through the K through 12 system. There's not a huge emphasis in health literacy, understanding things, understanding how medicines work. Sometimes we don't ask the right questions when we're going for our checkups because we don't know how to ask or we don't feel comfortable asking. Those are things. Finances are huge. If you don't have access to gym shoes or gym clothes or have access to means to get gym access or a personal trainer, all the things that keep people healthy, that can be a huge barrier. And someone spoke about trauma, our culture. Yeah. What else? I want to go back to trauma and then I want to jump into culture. But what are some things that I believe Tim, you said that. What about trauma sometimes prevents people from being physically well?
Well, I'm just thinking about, first of all, we're a spiritual people. And we always identify with those who came before us. And we identify what they went through before we make decisions. And so we're overthinking, first of all. And there was a scripture, and I take it to Zechariah 4:6, and we were talking about it. It talks about not by might, the words of the Lord. It's not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, said the Lord. And so then I think about the people in this epidemic of the vaccine and the decisions and the conscious or rational choices that we're making. And it all seems to be or stems from emotional or the lack of emotional stability and or awareness and or being in tune. Talked about hygiene. That's the first time I've heard it that way, but it makes the most sense. Keeping it simple. To be healthy, we have to want to be healthy. We have to desire to do these things and then make rational choices. So I think that past experiences, as well as experiences we demonstrate each day, we are all impacted. We're human beings. Someone emphasized that in the chat. And then we're spiritual people, keeping those things first and foremost, and then we just move through.
Nice, thank you. No, I love that you brought up that point. I definitely see where that's going. And Jamie chimed in as well as Dr. Chevelle, but I think that was a good point about trauma, generational distrust of the government. Yes, healthcare providers, et cetera, leads to it being a barrier. Yes to all that. And I loved how you brought out the vaccine. I don't think that's a controversial topic as though some people make it seem. But we have had a lot of mistrust throughout history. We have had information kept from us. We have had people think the worst of us, like people who have went through med school and still have just the wrong idea about how Black Americans, how Black women and Black men should receive care. And so that is a huge barrier. And I'm glad that you brought that up. On the same note with Dr. Chevelle, there are barriers with unhealthy habits within our culture. So within our eating habits, I would say anecdotally, I didn't grow up in a household that had just a spread of fruits and vegetables. It was very high sugar, high snacks for the children and different things like that. And my parents, they were just doing what they knew. They were doing what they were taught before that. And so using the tools to break those things, when we talk about nutrition, we talk about physical activity, I even think about, we were talking about hair earlier before we went on. I work out Monday through Thursday, and then I go get my hair done Thursday afternoon. Like I get my natural hair straightened. I'm like, okay, I can't work out for 3 days because I want to make sure that this money stretches. But that's just a very interesting way of thinking about my own health, putting my own physical health on the back burner because of an investment that I made into my hair. And so little things like that can play into how we stay well. And those can turn to big major things. So thank y'all for participating in that. This is great discussion.
Can I add to what you're
Sure.
saying, just
Yeah.
with regard to culture? A couple of things came to mind when I mentioned that. And one of them is, and I never thought about the hair, but you just kind of threw a new thing in there. But, you know, when we think about media and all of the different images and messages that we're seeing, through the different mediums that we are consuming, such as, social media or the TV and commercials and movies and TV shows and et cetera. There's a lot of promoting of unhealthy habits, such as there's no need to get physical. If you just stand up for 5 minutes, you're okay. If just walk for 30 minutes and you don't have to do anything else for the rest of the day, you're good. You've got your physical in for the day. Or, just take this pill and you never have to work out. And you're good, or don't worry about cooking this stuff. Just come to the grocery store. We got this pre-packaged stuff for you in the freezer area. You just pop it in the microwave and you had a healthy, nutritious meal. So there's a lot of you guys are laughing, but this is seeing all the time. And I think that is, first of all, sending the wrong message about how to take care of the body, but also at the same time, it's giving people permission to not take responsibility for taking care of the body. And that's just a snippet of things. There are other things as well that we can think about when it comes to a lot of the messages that we're seeing, that is literally kind of giving permission and promoting and advertising, hey, there's no need for you to worry about this, particularly with pharmaceuticals. You don't have to worry about dealing with that emotional stuff. Just take this pill, get your mind right, you good. Don't worry about the fact that you can't lose weight. Just take this shake, weight just fall right on off of you. You're good. It's just a matter of how you're thinking about. Here's another thing. Someone mentioned the vaccine thing, and we've had conversations in some of our executive meetings about this whole wellness topic, and when it comes to vaccines. And one of the questions I always say is, why is there not a lot of talk about building up the immune system, but instead here, take this and you're good. And I'm like, we have this mechanism within our being, within our physical being, that was intended to protect us from sickness and disease, and we're not talking about developing and building that. So I think our culture has a lot to do with the barriers that we are confronted with on a daily basis, keeping us from developing, building healthy lives. You just think about all the different messages out there with the food pyramid, and eat this and this is healthy, and then don't eat that because that's not healthy, or this wasn't healthy last year but it's healthy this year. You get confused. There's a lot of confusion out there. 1 week coffee is great, and next week coffee is the worst thing since sliced bread. So I'm just like, what? People get confused, and after a while I'm tired. It's too much. I have to think too much about trying to be healthy. So I'd rather not try to rummage through all of the whatever, and just do what feels comfortable or what makes me feel good. Does that make sense?
No, that's great. No, I appreciate that dialogue and those different talking points. I think there are two different trains of thoughts, kind of going back a little bit to like pharmaceutical. At one point, we do recognize that that is a huge money maker. And at another point, I do recognize that sometimes Western medicine has its benefits. And so that's very individualized. I don't think people, and this is my opinion, so I don't think people should put too much emphasis into the pharmaceutical things that are going on. But also, sometimes that it stands its purpose. But use your discernment. Also use your other outlets to make your best, healthiest choices. And then on the other part, you were speaking about, oh my, that point missed me. You were speaking about something. I was like, gosh, just education in general. And diets and different things like that. There's enough research that tells us what works, just plain simple. And we'll talk about that towards the end when we talk about eating well. There's basic things that we've known for years, and that's never going to change, right? And there are fad diets, there are like new superfoods that come out, but if we stick to the very basics, we'll be okay. And so it's just knowing the basics, not jumping into all the new things. And that can be hard when we're searching for things to be healthy from and the educational pursuits and stuff like that. But find the very basic things and the things that have always worked, clean, whether those are organic or vegetable, rinsed off vegetables in a can, however you can do things, very simplistic diet. And we'll talk about that. But this is all really good.
Before we go there, because now another thought has come to mind. This is good conversation. I'm loving it. So this idea about simplistic diet, and I've had several conversations about this, just because people tend to question me a lot about my own choice of way that I kind of consume food or my relationship with food. And we are in this, our culture now is so hustle driven, right? You have to be busy about doing everything. You got to be in everything. You got to do everything. And so you don't have time for nothing, right? Yeah. Because you're so much trying to keep up with this, that, and the other thing. And if you don't keep up with this, that, and the other thing, then you miss out, and you don't want to be miss out. You don't want to miss out because you don't want to be the one who's not in the know. So you have to, and so to be able to take care of your physical well-being, if that's what we're talking about, or just well-being as a whole, to be able to do that will require you to spend time, developing your capacity to create a sustainable lifestyle when it comes to being, physically well. Does that make sense?
No, yeah.
That means I would have to spend time away from, I have to sacrifice, right? Sacrificing is not the thing of the day, is what I'm trying to say with regard to our culture. Sacrificing, particularly for that, when you got McDonald's and Taco Bell and all these other places that's going to cook some food, and all I got to do is go up to the drive-thru and say, give it to me. And within 5 minutes, I got a whole, fries, drink, whatever I want, I got it in my hand. And all I did was just drive, through a drive-thru and I'm good. And I could be eating and still moving to get to that next whatever to do I got going on. And I don't have to sit in the kitchen and do mise en place or chop some vegetables and try to figure out how my seasonings is going to work with this particular whatever. You don't have to figure out all of that. That takes time, right? Yeah. To sit there or cook or whatever you're going to do, but to spend that kind of time in the kitchen in order to prepare yourself your own, meal that you know what you put in there, it's healthy. Yeah. That takes time. And that means I have to go home and I have to stop from my outside to do in order to do that. That I don't know. I think our culture has created a lot of barriers, for not being able to do. Does that make sense? Our current culture kind of hinders us from being able to do that, and to shift would mean to go against the grain of the culture.
No, that makes total sense. Time is a barrier as well. And if we're always go, 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 or have that FOMO, the fear of missing out, if we're not present at something, that will make us not want to make time for the things such as exercise and such as meal prepping or planning ahead. And so no, those are all valid points. Time and finances are probably the biggest barriers when I'm talking to college students. They're like, that's their world is like, I'm so busy, I have this. And it's like, okay, you have to build it in. First of all, you have to build margin into your life, time to just be, whatever that looks like for you. And then you need to build things to have healthy habits. Sometimes when people have the finances, they can literally pay somebody to meal prep healthy meals that are not frozen. They can just grab a bunch of meal prep meals. But if you don't have finances, you have to have the time to go shopping, to pull out those things. So time and finances are usually the biggest barriers. So thank you so much for pulling those out. And then the cultural aspects, those are all really dynamic. Thank you. Did anybody else have anything to add? This is a good conversation. Y'all are awesome.
Well, when I said finances, I was also thinking about the, it's cheaper to eat bad.
Yeah.
You know how they always making these deals, this 99-cent burger, this and that,
Yeah.
and then the salad be like $10.
And it don't be that good either.
It really don't. But we want to eat healthier. America's the obese continent or whatever, but they won't, do anything with the prices for the good stuff.
Yeah, no,
I do want to piggyback. I want to piggyback on all of what is being said, because I was just trying to improve my quality of life and more healthy choices in food. And Ms. Hines, you just nailed it. I mean, I was just thinking to myself, am I going to spend $12 on this meal at a fast food place? Or am I going to spend $9 on a plate of greens, a piece of some yams, neck bones, with onions and tomatoes?
Oh, now you go and you're hurting my feelings now.
That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. $9, I'm there, right?
Well, if you grab your ingredients and you be the one to prepare the greens and the neck bones with the smothered whatever you just said, it don't turn out to be $9. And then guess what? You have enough to eat over a course of days. So if you think about it in that way, it's really not expensive. Now, if you do go stop at the fast food restaurant and try to buy a salad, yeah, it's going to be more expensive. But if you think about the ingredients that's in that salad, just case in point, a side salad, a little small salad, with it was lettuce in there. They had some, a little bit of shredded carrots, and it's never enough, right? A little bit of shredded carrots. And it had like 3 or so little pieces of tomato. But anyway, that was all the salad was made up of. And then you get your little thing of dressing. And it's a little small side salad. That was like $6.
Yeah.
But if I went to the grocery store and got all of that, it would have cost me under $6, and I would have had enough money to be left over to buy other stuff to go into my salad, and I would have been able to have salad for not just that one point in time, that one, lunch point or that one dinner point. I would have had salad to last me probably the entire week.
I was just saying, you're thinking ahead. And when thinking ahead, you need time and you need to reflect on what you need to do ahead. Most people are not thinking ahead.
Well, I'm just trying to help my brother Tim here.
Oh, yeah.
I was going to tell you, I didn't
smoked neck bones or collard greens and whatnot.
I also wanted to just add, Dr. Chevelle, thank you so much. I appreciate you. God bless your spirit. And so what I wanted to add was that plate of neck bones, I'm going to say it again, plate of neck bones, collard greens, yams, sliced tomatoes with sliced onions lasts me 4 days. $9.
Well, I guess we need to go to the soul food place you go into, but we could talk about this topic all day. I implore you, even whether it's fast food or going to a soul food place, or how we cook it ourselves. You know, when I watch my mom cook candy yam, she pours almost a whole bag in there. And I'm just like, does it need that much? But it tastes really good. So I don't know. So everything in moderation.
That's
And
like Popeyes. You know, I went to Popeyes one time and I can't remember. I think I was in Louisiana or something like that. And I was at a conference, like, yeah, let's go to Popeyes and get something to eat. This was when I was actually eating meat. And I tasted the sweet tea and I swear I just burned it. I said, this is diabetes tea.
Yeah, diabetes in the cup.
Because I mean, all I did was take this one sip and I'm like, did you put the whole 5-pound bag in this 1 16-ounce cup? Like, what's going on? Yes, it's like excessive. Yeah.
We definitely drink our sugar. We definitely drink our sugar. Thank y'all so much. That was great little pit stop. Usually the physical dimension of wellness gets people going. But emotional is good. I think we can have a good conversation here as well. And it's defined as coping effectively with life and creating satisfying relationships. And so emotional health has not always been put on the forefront of our lives collectively. I'll speak for myself. I did not grow up in a household where I had emotions or had opinions in the eyes of my mother. So I could be dealing with stuff, but she wasn't the type. And this is my parents, they used the tools they had to the best of their ability, but it was not an open, expressive state. And that's the story for many people, where you're not able to put a name to how you're feeling, especially during those adolescent years. Especially during environmental external changes that happen, as well as internal changes that happen during childhood. And those things are translate into our adulthood when we're not able to say, I feel sad, I feel angry. We're not able to say those things and put a title to those things, then they manifest through our behavior and other actions. And so taking time daily to listen and acknowledge our feelings, again, that would take time. Being able to sit and be like, I feel anxious, I feel stressed about this. And then just overall how we view our lives. Black adults in the US are more likely than white adults to report persistent symptoms of emotional distress. So not feeling happy, feeling sad, but not knowing why. Sometimes people say, I just feel blah, I just feel, and that can be indicators of depression as well. And so not seeing that, and I believe y'all had the conversation last month about suicide and a number of Black Americans dying by suicide. Growing up, I used to hear a lot of Black Americans say, oh, we don't do that. We don't do that. And we do know that that is not true. And so finding good ways, healthy ways of coping. We can probably name a million, I'm gonna flip it. What are some ways that people cope with their emotions in an unhealthy way? Unhealthy ways of coping with their emotions.
Alcohol and eating.
Yes, so alcohol, so substance misuse, whether that is through alcohol or other substances and drugs, is a huge parameter. And then eating sugar, different things that make us feel good, that dopamine response, right? Well, and there's nothing wrong with eating. There's nothing necessarily wrong with those comfort foods every now and then. But why are we eating? Are we eating because we're hungry? Are we intuitively eating, or are we eating because we're sad? Are we angry because we're bored? Finding putting that to it. Someone put violence. Yeah, so violence, whether that is violence to themselves through non-suicidal self-injury or violence acting out towards other people. And then isolation, that's a big one as well. And I'm sorry. And so there's, hyperactivity. Yep. That can be seen when people can't, pick away and their emotions manifest in a way that are not healthy. And then there's all these other things that are positive that we can do. Talking to somebody, exercising, eating foods that bring nourishment, eating foods that have vitamin B in it can help with fighting some of that stress and anxiety that we're feeling. Eating foods that are going to promote healthy things instead of things that are not. The overall goal of emotional wellness is to make you more aware of your emotions and cope with them. That's it. When we're aware of our emotions, whether we do that by ourselves or with the assistance of a licensed professional counselor. I know maybe some of you on here are licensed clinical social workers or you work in that mental health component, when people are able to talk through and y'all are able to find a solution for how they can cope or how they can understand their emotions, that is good. But it's not usually, I'll say that over the last couple of years, it's become a bigger conversation. But it has not always been a big conversation in the Black community to focus on your emotional wellness. You just kind of like put your head down and push through. So any comments or dialogue about the emotional state or how we as a collective cope with our emotions?
I wanted to say, I feel like I'm moving through this or that phase, a lot of things that we're talking about, but with my siblings, I'm the eldest, youngest brother. I don't know how that meant, but I'm right there in that middle where everyone just turns to and they just dump it, and I finally learned to receive and or do as I'm obligated to do as a brother. And I had to think about how do each of us manage our stress or manage our anxiety. I had to accept that, my parents, I grew up in a household, we talked about our parents, I grew up in a household of mental illness. So my mother and my father both, had some form of mental illness diagnosed, taking medication, manic depressive, schizophrenia,
Yeah.
bipolar, chemical imbalance, the whole nine. It did not touch the children. So none of us were ever diagnosed. None of us ever were treated. None of us ever took medication, but it's still the behaviors were learned, and we're mimicking these behaviors of mental illness in our culture, perpetuating those things. So I had to, even though we weren't diagnosed, I had to say, how is it that my brother Sam is managing his anxiety in each one of us? And it was some sort of physical. We talked about drugs. We talked about how we manage ourselves, our behaviors, and so forth. But yeah, just taking that opportunity as a clinician or as a person who is interested in researching, how does one manage that? How does one handle those things? And that's that sacred time that we talked about, where we read or we pray or we do the things that we do, is all.
Thank you for sharing. And no, those are great. That's great conversation points. And are we taught these coping mechanisms early on? You mentioned the spiritual aspect of it. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but there is research that shows that having religion and spiritual connection does help with our overall stress levels. And so whether that through contemplative prayer, asking for people to pray and us believing that their prayers are helping. So it's kind of like a placebo effect in the science term, but we know, if you are of the Christian or other faith, that is the Lord working. And so other things that we can think about is, if people use mental health licensed professional counselors, being able to provide that for your children, or if you growing up and you need that, is always a good thing as well. So thank you for sharing. Any other comments or questions about that part of emotional wellness?
I was just going to say, I agree with you. I think that for the last 2 years, it's been talked about more. I don't know if it's executed more with actually hooking up with someone to, work with in the mental health realm. I'm glad that we're having the conversation, but sometimes even I hear, colleagues, myself, with who I work with, that are like, I think therapists will need a therapist sometimes. There's only so much that you can, take in, and transference happens regardless if we want it to or not, in some ways. And so, even at that time, I don't hear about us even talking about the belief for going to talk to somebody sometimes. So it's interesting to have those conversations.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm a mental health first aid instructor. Are any of y'all familiar with mental health first aid? Probably heard of it. I know MHMR does it here too. And so me and my director, we do it at Baylor for Baylor employees, but I want to branch out to the community a little bit. But I said that to say that in those conversations with people, and we mention those in the community who can help, and we list out, peer support specialists, social workers, mental health providers, people are like always kind of leery, but they're interested. And so my belief, and this is anecdotally, is that if we keep talking about it and keep providing those resources, that more people will buy into it. I know in my group of girlfriend conversations, we're like, hey, we went to Therapy for Black Girls directory and we found, a therapist there. Our therapist, especially with this telebehavioral health, it's just been during COVID times, has been a blessing because we don't have to drive anywhere. We just need to have a secure access to internet, which that can be a barrier for some people. And we're also able to have a Black therapist, someone who already has our cultural, has some of those things that we find to be similar and help talk through. And so, we're just keep talking about it, keep providing the resources. And when people really need it and they're able to, I hope they bite into it.
I think one of the things that concerns me is, and this is a whole nother conversation, so I won't kind of even, open it up. But I think just not to say that therapists is not a good direction to go, but I think we also need to say that what's key is to find a secure, safe individual that you can be vulnerable with and that you can share the most intimate, thoughts and feelings and experiences. Let me just put experiences all together, that you can share your most intimate experiences with in order to be able to process through them to get to the place where you, can be well. And it might not be with a professional such as a therapist or clinician, but it's a safe person. It is a safe individual that you can trust with, the most vulnerable part of self. It could be your next door neighbor. Or, the elderly woman who lives next door, or the elderly man who lives next door, or the person who, the grocery store manager. Like, it does not have to be a therapist, right? Because now I'm thinking about individuals who don't have the financial resources.
Oh, yeah.
To go and get a therapist. So it doesn't have to be a therapist. It just needs to be someone that you trust to be able to share your most intimate experiences with, to be able to process through, who will have your best interest in heart, and your best interest in mind, who will help you process through those experiences so that you can get to a place of being well, of being secure, of being able to, get to the other side of emotional disparity, right? And so I just wanted to point that out, because I don't think that, having a therapist is the only way to go, or that's the only way you'll be able to find, relief. You want to be able to, identify someone and find someone who is going to, who will care and have compassion, and be able to embrace you so that you can get to that better place. And it may not be a therapist. And I think in our community, the things that I come to find that we struggle with is there's a lot of division in the Black community, because we compete so much with each other, because we're trying to, for various reasons. I'm not even gonna go down that road, but we do compete a lot with each other. And then we also have, these long-standing beliefs just about mental health and emotional health. And if you are struggling or challenged in any kind of way, don't tell nobody about that. You keep that to yourself, and so we need to get to a place, because otherwise you'd be, labeled as crazy. They start talking about you, coming in on a short yellow bus and all these different things. And so, and then that's degrading, right? You don't want to have that kind of traumatic experience just because you're being human and you're needing to relate with another human about being human, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so being able to, first of all, shift the narrative or the thinking in our community about talking about wellness as a whole, and needing to reach out for those, for encouragement, for inspiration, for support, that there's nothing wrong with that. And we
Yeah.
need to do more of that. And we need to promote that and advance that in our community. But the barrier is how we're thinking about that. And then, we tend to, berate and treat people as, they're nothing because they're having these kind of experiences. But we want to shift that and turn that around. Make yourself be someone that others can come to.
Yeah.
And they're in those places and they need to have conversation so that they can have the conversation with you and be able to process through. And you don't have to be a therapist in order to be compassionate and care about someone and care about their well-being. And so I think we need to do more of that in our community, have more of those kinds of people so that people can be okay with being vulnerable enough to share their life experiences. And it's not shameful. They don't have to be ashamed of it. They don't have to be apologetic. They just need to just say, hey, I'm needing someone to talk to right now. Can you and I talk? And it's okay.
Oh, yeah, no, I think you are right on point so much that it goes into our next slide about social support. So you are right on it. But also I challenge your thought a little bit about it, about the idea that that's 100% lacking. I think in some areas we do great when it comes to that social support, when it comes to handling life. It just may manifest differently. I think about when men, this is thinking about in some of the conversations, when men play sports or recreational basketball, or they go fishing, and sometimes it's silence and sometimes it's conversations that they wouldn't have with anyone else. And so that shows and that social support sometimes manifests itself in other ways, in girl talk, in
Notice that you're mentioning needing to be connected, right?
Mhm.
But what about those individuals who feel isolated in their community and they are not connected, right?
No, that's a valid point.
They don't go to the local barbershop and hang out in the barbershop, or they don't feel welcome in that barbershop, right?
Mhm.
Because they're not a part of the whatever, or they're not connected to that girl group, or they don't have someone to go fishing with. They're isolated in the community. What about those individuals? And so to have that kind of positive relationship and have those supports, such as, if Tim is online, he's a part of Omega Psi Phi. That's a huge support network that's a huge network of support that he has. He doesn't have to go far if he wanted to go outside of it. He doesn't have to go far. He just pick up the phone and he has somebody, there to support him. But what about the brother who is not connected to a fraternity like that? What about the person who is not connected to a girl group or whatever? They're isolated and they don't have individuals per se in this connected kind of social grouping type of way to be able to have these conversations. So what I'm saying is, aside from these, you belong to us group kind of deals, aside from that, whether you are part of this group or not a part of this group, just for the simple fact that you are a human being and you are in need of some kind of, support, I want to support you. You don't have to belong to this group, or you don't have to come to the barbershop to get that support, or you don't have to, go fishing with me to get that kind of support. And I'm particularly talking about those who may feel isolated. They don't feel like they belong, or they don't feel welcomed or embraced. Those individuals tend to suffer more, emotionally, and those individuals don't feel safe, or they don't feel like they can turn to someone and be vulnerable with their whatever stuff to be able to process through that, because they don't sense that someone else cares about what they're going through. And so those individuals won't benefit from what you're mentioning in terms of the connectedness. And so what I'm saying is we need to find ways to reach the people who are not connected.
And that's where I want to jump in there, Dr. Chevelle. I mean, valid points all across the board. And I don't think we're talking about differences. I don't think we're even talking about, competition. What we're talking about is just being available emotionally, just simple compassion. And so some of the most intimate, revealing and intimate moments happened outside of Omega Psi Phi. happen outside of masonry, happen outside of being a part of a church or group. But looking at the individual, and I can give you more countless examples that happen outside of a fraternity, where there was a white female, 73 years old, has been my mentor in my life and taught me how to write. You know, I went to the University of Kansas and I was 19 years old, and she discovered I didn't know how to read or write. And so I'm a dyslexic learner, right? So she worked with what I had. She didn't let them diagnose me. And then we developed this relationship, and over time we come across these racial barriers. And she asked me, help me to identify my prejudice. You know, I said, wait a minute. But it was a very powerful moment. And so, like Dr. Chevelle was talking about, there are people who are clinicians, there are people who are connected, but do suffer with their own afflictions, with their own guilt, their own shame, and can't turn outside of a group, can't look to the brother, can't pick up the phone. They're paralyzed through trauma, through emotion, or just that aberrant spirit. You know, so we come to understand these things through compassion, simplicity. How are you doing? And I need to know your name. How you doing?
Yeah. And I like you leading, ending with that. And I'll share this short story and then I'm gonna stop talking because I feel like I'm talking a lot here.
You're fine.
But here's a case in point, and this is before I became, this master level social worker or whatever. I was, in this particular place, and just one, we were I can't remember what I was attending, but I was trying to find a seat, before the event began, so that I can, how you like to do those things. You want to turn your cell phone off. You need to go go to the restroom. Get ready to, be engaged in whatever the event is.
Yeah.
So as I'm coming in, and I'm trying to find my seat, a young lady passes by me. And I smiled at her and say, hey, how you doing? And she looked at me like I had 3 heads on my face, on my shoulder. And she was just like, hi. And she smiled back. I just didn't think nothing of it and just went to my daily to do. The next thing I was going to do is go to the bathroom. She followed me to the restroom. She followed me to the restroom. And after I finished doing what I was doing in the restroom, I'm at the sink washing my hands. And she's standing there. And I'm like, hey, how are you? Are you attending this? I'm kind of small talking, right? Yeah. And she looked at me, she answered me, but then she said, thank you so much for saying hello to me. She was like, no one says hello to, like, the smallest thing, just saying hi. I'm like, what? I had that kind of impact just because I said hello. And she sat there and began to talk to me. I don't know why she felt comfortable just sharing with me what she was going through, but she had such a breakthrough in that moment, because I stopped and attended to what she was in need of at that moment. And we talked we was late to the event, let me just tell you, because I wanted to spend time, talking with her and encouraging her, because she was going through something. She was in such emotional pain at that moment. And for me to just say hi to her, it was like, OMG, it was mind blowing for her. And I'm talking about that. If I decided that I was too busy, I had to go and be at the very beginning of this event, I would have dismissed her totally and not spoken with her and not taken the opportunity to, and I never met this young lady before. This was my first meeting of her. So you don't even have to, you don't have to be known. As Tim said, making yourself available. And so I made myself available to her, and I was able to, help her at that time. We even talked a little bit more after that. After the event was over, we were in the parking lot, standing by each other's cars and talking and stuff. And so, but that was what she needed. That's what she needed. And I lend myself to that. That's not what I came there for. I came there for the event, and I was excited about going to the event. But my simple hello to her, opened up the door. She perceived me as someone, safe to share her experience with.
Yeah.
And
No,
that's
these,
what I'm talking about. Just that, something just that simple. And you don't have to go around with a, something on your forehead, or have a t-shirt. Hey, I'm available to talk about emotional stress. You don't have to, you don't have to do that, but you who you are and how you present yourself, how you relate to other people will give people the, as you mentioned, Alyssa, discernment, will discern that you are someone that they can safely come and talk with, and be able to process through what's going on with them, whatever that emotional pain that they're dealing with at the time. And so that's kind of what I'm saying. I don't mean to kind of belabor the point, but this particular person, I don't know what her financial condition was, but she perhaps may not have had the financial resources to go and sit in front of a therapist or a psychologist or psychiatrist or whoever in order to receive the kind of help that maybe they could provide. But I will say that that conversation, me stopping and talking with her and sharing with her that day, did make a difference. And I wasn't doing no therapy. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's all I'm saying is we just, as a community, I think, we can help each other, as a community, as a community of people, as human beings, right? To deal with emotional stuff. If we allow ourselves to be available, as Tim says, be available, and lend ourselves to those opportunities, to seize those opportunities.
To the best of our ability.
To the best of our ability. And
sometimes
you don't have to be, you don't have to go to school for this.
Yeah. No, I think thank you, Tim, and thank you, Dr. Chevelle. Y'all bring out very great points. And I apologize if I made it sound like a group or organization thing. I meant just individual friendships or interactions. But yes, if you, to the best of your ability, if you have the emotional capacity, because sometimes we can take on more than we could bear, and that messes with our self-care, make yourself available. I think that's beautiful. Both of the stories that y'all shared are just beautiful ways. So we can all challenge each other to be better humans and individuals, especially within our community, to help alleviate some of that emotional distress. Moving to the next dimension of wellness is social. And so, and this just talks about having connection and belonging, whatever we see that, whether that's in the family that we were born in or the family that we choose, or those individual connections. Having purposeful repair of our family and communities is important. When we can have purposeful repair, mend relationships that have been broken, have actual honest conversations that bring about connection within our families and society is great. Giving back to the community, our community in particular. I heard about a trunk or treat in East Waco, I believe someone was talking about within their work, but also that's an aspect of giving back to the children in that area. And then social support and stress, which we kind of meshed into the emotional and social aspect. We value family structure, romantic partnerships, marriages, and children. And even through the institutional and structural barriers, even though they try to prevent us from realizing it, but we as Black people collectively, we do value that. But there are things that kind of factor in. And when we talk about social support and stress, and we kind of hit on a lot of these things, when we have social support, it can provide a buffer for that stress. When we can have those little connections, whatever those look like for you, it can help when there's like a potential threat. So we think about stress, we think about that fight or flight response. It's like, I see a bear, is it really going to physically harm me? Sometimes we perceive things are going to physically harm us or kill us. When I'm talking to students, I'm like, is that quiz going to physically harm you? Is that exam going to physically harm you? If you don't do well this semester, will that physically harm you? And for some of them, it's like, yes, it will, but in all reality, it won't. And having someone to talk about that with, whether that's through your social support networks or just individuals at conferences and areas, can alleviate some of that stress that we feel day to day. There's strong connections between our social support and health. And so the more social support, so you think about I always use the example of the elderly when they are in, not hospice, but in retirement homes. Pre-COVID, I know that was one of the ministries that my church would do. We would go and sing and sit and be with people. And so being able to talk to them, that helps with extending their quality of life and service of life, and just providing a service to them, just being there to listen and to talk to them. So social support is really key. I think we really hit that nail on the head with talking about how social support can make a difference in our community as well as just our overall health. Oh, I went backwards. And then we're boiling down to the last couple dimensions. And so environmental, and I'm mindful of the time, environmental. And so being mindful of our environment, whether that is the sustainability aspect of it, where do we live at? Do we feel safe? Is it a hazardous environment? Is there environmental pollution, heavy pollution that can cause cancers and different things like that? Be mindful of our environment, and supporting and advocating for our environment is huge. Understanding, is your current environment, is it a safe space? Is it neat and kept and up regularly to whatever your standards are of cleaning? When we have a clean and organized space and we feel safe in our space, we're more likely to feel less stressed and feel a little bit more healthier and have a better quality of life. There are some environmental justices and environmental racism that we see, and there's a lot of research that talks about it. And then some activists call environmental racism the new Jim Crow, as it subjects many community of colors or Black Americans to inequitable living conditions. I think the biggest outrage that we had a couple years ago, and I'm pretty certain it still hasn't been fixed, was out of Flint, Michigan, when we learned about like the water crisis. There's a lot of outrage, a lot of people having conversation around that. There's many studies that talk about how it's just not in Michigan, it's just not in that one area, but all over. And you can probably think of some examples yourself of environmental justices and environmental racism that play a part in our community. And then the last point just talks about how people of color are more likely to die because of environmental causes. I would also say if you live in areas where there's a lot of violence, or areas where strong use of substances or selling of substances, that can hinder your quality of life, how you interact with your environment. You probably won't let your children go outside. You probably won't go outside. So environmental wellness plays a huge role within our community. And there's little things that we can do every day. Again, advocate for better things in our community. Be sustainably mindful, reduce, reuse, recycle. I know there's a lot of debate about climate change, but the weather just keeps getting more interesting. So again, use your discernment and research about that, but little things every day that we can do to create a better environment for ourselves. Financial wellness is also a huge component. And so it talks about financially well persons fully aware of their financial state. They know where their money's coming from. They know where their money's going. They know that their money is going to be able to get their bills paid, get food on their table, so on and so forth. And everybody doesn't typically see financial wellness and the greatness or that Maslow, when we think of Maslow hierarchy of needs, they reach that self-actualization and money is just flowing and have dispensable income. And so that's another thing that we as a people are working on. And there's so many barriers and so many things that have kept us over the years from getting the best financial wellness and financial literacy. So financial literacy differs among gender and age. And so it's more so among Black men and older individuals that have a greatest understanding of financial literacy. And there's a few things that we can pull from that. If it's not a huge emphasis in K through 12 schools, or it's not a huge emphasis when we were growing up, like through our parents or our guardians. A lack of financial resilience was most common among African Americans and whites. And it's in 2019, I don't know why I put pre-COVID, but obviously that was pre-COVID. So you can imagine what it probably looks now. For some people during that time, they really did thrive. and then from other people, not so much, and then put them even further back. And so thinking about financial resiliency, are they able to overcome certain things? If they were laid off, did they have enough money saved up to not go into debt or to go without, is big. And then understanding the components of financial literacy, learning, knowing how you're going to earn something, your jobs or extra side hustles, different things like that. How you spend, your spending habits. Are you spending well? Are you just spending it because you got it? Understanding how to save and the idea of investments. Investments are very interesting to me. I'm still learning about it, but the idea of the stock market, that's pretty big. And then borrowing, understanding what borrowing looks like, and then protecting, making sure that you're not getting your identity stolen, making sure that you're keeping your passwords protected, you're keeping your bank information secret. And then as we get older, trying not to have like elder fraud and different things like that can occur. And so financial literacy is big. There's so many resources here in Waco that focus on building financial literacy and building financial planning, a home ownership that if you have never taken part of, there you can take a part of. You can literally just kind of Google some resources or 211 it to find different resources for the financial planning about it. And if y'all know anything at the top of your head, y'all can feel free to put that in the chat. Other ways of assessing your financial literacy, like, do I know how to do a personal budget? And even if you know how to do a personal budget, do you go back and check it and make sure that you're staying within that personal budget? Having an emergency fund, what does that look like for you? What do you need to survive and sustain? And understanding your credit score, understanding credit reports, and keeping up with those things, because that can impact our health. So as the bubble says, it can seriously impact our psychological health and can put us in distress if we're living in poverty. And that's something that we can work on every day and then work on as a collective. Yes, that is a really big issue for wellness. Exactly. And then occupational wellness. So 2 more and then we'll go get through to the tips. It's not just job dissatisfaction. When we talk about occupational wellness, people usually, I think about my parents, again, I'm using my personal examples. They just work. When I went to college or I applied to go to college, I didn't know what I was going to college for. I just knew I did not want to do the work that my parents were doing because they would come home every day. They would hate it. They were miserable. They're factory workers, and that provided for us. But I just knew that that was the life I did not want for myself. And so it's not just job dissatisfaction, but also there is lack of support within that job, especially around racism in the workplace, microaggressions given by non-Black colleagues. All those things play a role in our occupational wellness as well. Finding balance outside of the work role at our household, if you have children or other familial duties, not having a good work-life balance can also make our occupational wellness be depleted. So a change in mindset, one of the things that as a collective we can learn how to do better is understand that we are more than our careers. We are not defined by our careers. A lot of times when people introduce themselves, they say, I am such and such and I do this, but you are so much more than your career. And when you understand that and don't put so much emphasis on that, that can also help alleviate some of that stress that we feel, that can take away from that occupational wellness part. And then support through the Black church. And we're going to go into the spiritual wellness in a second. But there are some studies that talk about how having low occupational wellness or feeling a lot of dissatisfaction or stress within your workplace, sometimes that can be combated through support and through religion. And so looking at what is the best way for you to cope with occupational wellness without necessarily quitting. If you have the means to quit and you can quit, then by all means, go for it. My parents used to always say, make sure you have another job lined up before you do that. But what can you do to kind of sustain yourself mentally and keep yourself well so that your occupational wellness doesn't get depleted sooner? So, and then above what talks about African Americans overexposure to stressful aspects of work and the link between job stress disproportionately impacts us as a collective. So occupational wellness is huge. And then lastly, and we've kind of hit on this throughout the whole conversation, which has been great, understanding our spiritual wellness component. And some of y'all indicated that as a people, we do great with this. So understanding religion in the Black church, how speaking from a Christianity lens, that was a place of support. That was a place of community organizing. That was a place to develop plans to survive the things that were going on, such as slavery, such as going through the Jim Crow civil rights area. The Black church played a huge, significant role in building the community that we have today. Some people might argue that the Black church doesn't play as big of a role as that today, and that can be a long, drawn out conversation. But that's a big staple that we have in history and culture. And there's a reason why we should stay connected to our spiritual roots and ideas. However you define that, there's psychology and religion. There's studies that show that when we have religious practices, that helps lower our stress levels. We also talk about forgiveness, the idea of forgiveness. In a lot of religious practices, we forgive, and that helps us mentally and helps with our stress. When we walk around and we're unhappy, we're mean, we're unforgiving, we're more likely to have cardiovascular disease. We're more likely to have other heart problems, hypertension. There's a word called hot reactor. If you're a hot reactor, everything upsets you. You're not very easygoing, right? Those are some things that can bother us. What are some, the art of silence? What's that?
I'm sorry, the art of silence is more or less allowing what is to be and maintaining the faith that is and will always be. Sometimes you're in a situation where you have to get that word. But my grandfather would always say, I never know why he said this. He would always say, Lizzie, he's talking to his wife, my grandmother, said, Lizzie, watch my smoke. And he just dropped it, and so parables. And so even like with my siblings or with my church or with my fraternity, my brothers, my loved ones in the community, it's not always what you say, it's what you do. It's more or less how you stand, what you stand for, who you listen to, what you emulate, and being able to put those things together where there is, what do you call that? Where it just functions, connectivity. We talked about that, being connected. And so allowing others, I'm listening, I watch Sister Hines there and Brother Tony, and I'm listening to Sister McKinney over there. Not much, but they're here says more than anything that could be said. Silence.
Thank you. Are there other, and I know we're running up against time, so if you have to go, I completely understand, but are there other different spiritual practices that we can think of that help kind of combat some of the things that we feel a deficit in wellness, other spiritual practices? Yeah, that can spending time outside, contemplative prayer, mindfulness, and that's just being present. And then meditation are some things that come to mind. And meditation doesn't have to be a bad thing. It could just be sitting there, having your own mantra, praying. You can make it whatever you want it to be.
I was just going to say something just very simple. I think learning how to, number one, say no.
Boundaries, yeah.
But also learning to not take everything personally.
Yeah.
I think should be part of the, spiritual practices in terms of safeguarding you from, having any kind of deterioration to your spiritual condition.
Yeah, that's good. I would add to your point, minding your business, that will save you a lot if you just focus on the things that because when you don't, you doing too much sometimes. That could be good. So keeping timing in mind, I have a few tips that I really can package up and provide in like a document for you to share. Dr. Chevelle, you just let me know where you want to go with that, because they're just tips and resources, but I can share that. You can put that on your social media. You can tag it next to however you're going to share this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
keep
just because
going. Yeah.
be mindful of the time, but there are some great resources that we have here. And then within the Waco McLennan Public Health District, it's they provide different services. And so if you're ever in need or want to provide something else, they usually have a sliding scale. So check out their website or give them a call. And then MHMR, they provide different wraparound services here. And there's probably just a list of so much more. And so I always tell people to call the 211, let them know you're in Waco or McLennan County or wherever you are. I don't know where all y'all are today. Let them know wherever you are, what type of resources you're looking for. If there's a financial barrier, you can definitely just jump into that. Some resources that I like that are outside of books. Books are great, but I also have quite enjoyed podcasts. And so one of them is Another View, the radio show. They discuss a lot of Black health, a lot of the dimensions of wellness that we're talking about. They really focus in on that. They talk about COVID-19, the flu, heart, breast cancer awareness, whatever you can think about. They really discuss how that impacts our overall health. The NPR's Code Switch has a variety of topics that impact people of color, not necessarily just Black Americans, but people of color in general. Therapy for Black Girls with Dr. Joy is my personal favorite. If you've never listened to it or went to the directory, it's a great place to be. And then Therapy for Black Men, didn't leave out my brothers on the call, website, blog. And there's some other really good podcasts that I didn't put down on here that really speak to men in different ways. And there you can find them on Spotify if you have a smartphone. I know that's it can be a jump for some people, or you can log onto a website and listen to these podcasts on Spotify for free. And then meditation minis. And these are short clips of meditations that you can do. And they can be as simple as just music in the background, or you saying something like, I am still, I am relaxed. They're short. So if you don't like to be alone with your thoughts for very long, you can still sit with that and do that very quickly. And that's also free. You would just log into that. And then, like I was saying, I'm going to share the resources, the different tips and stuff that I had in another document. But if you want to continue this conversation, or you have more to add, you're like, Alyssa, you forgot this, you can go ahead, you can send me an email, or we can connect on LinkedIn. And I would love to just keep this conversation going. I'm easy to find too. I'm just here at Baylor in Waco. So yeah, that's really all I have.
You forgot your tips.
Oh, do you want me to go through?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I'm so sorry. I didn't know if I was going over time. All right, that's totally fine. All right, so closing out the dimensions, we're going to go into 5 tips for just being your best self individually. And so the first one is eating well. And I think we had a great conversation around what that looks like to plan time and finances, right? And so my plate, which is like the new food pyramid, and yes, it changed a couple years ago. I think this is going to be pretty sustainable though, based off of like public health data. And there's simplicity in this. So when you think about the pyramid, I know the pyramid growing up was what I saw. So you think about the pyramid, it used to have like the little things you shouldn't have a lot of, like the sugars and oils at the top, and then it kind of sprinkled down. But this gives you a good visual representation of how your plate should look, and that helps with health literacy. So in the simplest form, this is what it can look like. And so incorporating fruits, a lot more vegetables, a palm-sized amount of meat for lunch and dinner. As Americans, we don't need a lot of protein. We get enough of it in different areas. And I know I heard someone saying that they are a vegetarian or vegan. So making sure that you get your protein in different ways, which it is possible to get that in different ways. And then whole grains or grains, dairy as well. And so little things. And what you don't see on this plate is like the sugars, like the little desserts and stuff. Not to say you can't have it, but you should have it very sparingly and in moderation. If you want to bake your own sugars, that's totally fine. But if you want to indulge in a little small little Debbie cake, that's fine too. You just don't want to make that an everyday habit. The best advice that I got from a dietitian, and I do say dietitian because they went to school and they focused in on that. Our doctors are great, but they did not focus in on nutrition science. So getting information from a dietitian is key. The best information I ever got from a dietitian was that there's no such thing as bad food, except for the chicken that you leave out on the counter all day. And so it's the idea that little bits of things every day, little bits of things throughout your life will not harm you. It's if we consume too much of anything, because anything can be a bad thing. And so my plate is just, whenever I talk to my students about this, it's just very helpful to kind of visualize it, and then you can have little small snacks on the side. Very briefly, I always like to showcase the US News rankings, and this is the updated 2021. And so it discussed different diets or different eating habits that people can have. And these are the top ones, with being Mediterranean diet, the DASH diet, which is dietary approaches to stop hypertension, the flexitarian diet, the Weight Watchers, and Mind diet. And some of these are very familiar, like Weight Watchers. The Mediterranean diet is not necessarily like a fad diet. It's just like people who live along the coast, they eat more vegetables and fruit. It's more of that and less of the heavy meats. So that it was #1 diet of choice for being healthy. And then the DASH diet, which helps with the hypertension and also increases fruits and vegetables. The flexitarian diet is just as it sounds, it's flexible. So if you don't want to have meat Monday through Friday, but you want something on Saturday, that's what that diet looks like for individuals to dive into. And then, so listening to your body and different things is good. You want to definitely know what your body is responding to. Weight Watchers, very popular thing. It just has a holistic approach through the social support, putting points to food, not necessarily making things bad or good, but putting points to it. And then the Mind diet, which is a combination of the DASH and the Mediterranean diet. It doesn't restrict anything either. And that's another thing about these ones that I'm talking about. They're not necessarily restricting anything from you. So it's not like the keto diet and stuff like that, which is very popular right now, but it's not sustainable. If you talk to your dietitian or talk to a dietitian or anybody within the community who studies this, keto, there's a lot of information out there about it, and it's not the most sustainable, even when it has been, they have a modified version of it as well. But these have been shown to be like the best, healthiest ones if you're ever interested in changing your eating habits for the long haul. So that's eating. And then tip #2, moving well. A lot of these things you're like, yes, Alyssa, we know we need to get up and get moving. The goal is 10,000 steps a day. The goal is to work out for at least 150 minutes of moderate or vigorous exercise. And that can look different from each person. So like I said earlier, for my own hair journey reasons, I'll work out vigorously Monday through Thursday, and then I'll take breaks or do light workouts throughout the week. So you want to do that. The average person takes about 3,000 to 5,000 steps a day, but just over 2,000 steps in a mile. So just if you have a wearable device or you're on your phone, just track how many steps you're getting day to day and strive for the 10,000. Consider how much time you're just kind of sitting down. There's consequences to sitting, and that's continuing on to tip #2. There's consequences of sitting. So immediately muscle activity decreases, rapid lowering of metabolic rate, and I'll show you a graph on the next one and what that looks like. After you've been sitting down for too long, you decrease your HDL, which is your high density lipids. Those are the good, healthy ones we need, and increase in the LDL. And so you want the HDL to be good and the LDL to be down. And so when we sit down for too long, that's what occurs. And then if 24 hours of sitting, insulin effectiveness decreases. So our body's not processing it the way we need to. We feel tightness and soreness because we're not moving. Usually when people are 24 hours, they're on bed rest or something else is going on, but to just always be sitting can be hard. So if you have an office job, it's recommended that you get up for at least 2 to 3 minutes throughout the day, every hour to move around. And you might be like, oh, my slide's a little. You might be like, well, I'll sit down for a couple hours and I'll get up, I'll work out, and I'll sit back down. Well, research shows that it's more effective if you get up throughout the day than just get up for a little bit and then sit back down. And so a burst of activity, and I apologize, you can't see that clearly. A burst of activity versus just getting up, there's a better, it's better for your health to move around throughout the day than to just do something and sit back down. And so I challenge you to try to incorporate a little physical activity throughout the day, getting up, stretching, going get you some water. If you keep drinking water, you're gonna have to go to the restroom. So that's the key. Just keep drinking water and then moving around and doing what you need to do. And sometimes you could put reminders on your computer, on your phones, post-it note to get up and move around. So moving is essential. And then tip number 3, stress less. And so first, being able to understand when you feel stress is important. If you're not a normal irritable person, if you usually have excitement and joy, and you're not a worrier, and all of a sudden you start feeling like you're overthinking things, you start feeling intolerable, like everyone's getting on your nerves. I always say this is when I had my stapler moment. When I was younger and I had my first professional job, it was a very stressful job, so stressful. I did not work there for very long because I found another one. But I remember someone moving my stapler outside of my cubicle, and I absolutely lost it. And I'm not that type of person. And I realized it wasn't about the individual moving my stapler. It was that I was feeling stressed and I wasn't coping with it healthily in a healthy way. And I took that out on the individuals around me. And so when we do not take care of our stress, especially as Black men and Black women, that comes out in other ways. And so understanding when you're feeling stressed and you're thinking behavior, and then taking the time to, 1, identify your stress, 2, if possible, eliminate the stress. We can't always eliminate the stressors. If we can't eliminate it, change our thinking about that stressor. And then the 4th one is manage the stress to the best of our ability. So if you can't eliminate it, because we can't eliminate everything, change our thinking about it, and then manage it to the best of our ability, whatever tools those are for you. And then sleeping well. Sleep hygiene is huge. Now, if you have insomnia or sleep apnea, that's a little bit different from what I'm about to discuss. So that's a disclaimer. But if you just realize that your sleep habits are a little bit off, these are just some tips that you can do to kind of promote the best restful sleep. So turning off your cell, or not necessarily turning it off, maybe putting it on do not disturb, or lowering it to the blue light so you don't have the light bothering your brain. And your brain, when they see that blue light, it's like, oh, it's daytime. It's time for me to be active. When in all actuality, it's time for you to go to bed, right? Spend time in the sunlight so your brain sees what it feels like to be in the sun, what it looks like to be up. And then when it's time to go to bed, make sure you have like a dark, cool, peaceful area to go to sleep in. So that's the conversation you need to have with your partner or your spouse about making sure that your room is a peaceful place. And make sure you have that conversation. The best one I love about here, if you get in your bed and you start feeling anxious or a little stressed out, you're tossing and turning, get up, do some light work, whatever that looks like, something very light, maybe sitting there reading something, not on your phone, but on a book. And then when you feel sleepy, getting back into your bed. Sometimes it helps to journal out the thoughts or making a to-do list of the thoughts that are running inside of your head and then going back to sleep. Sometimes people need like little white noise as well. And so if you don't have a sound machine, you can turn on, I keep talking about Spotify because that's the only thing I buy into. You can turn on an app, put on a sleep timer, flip the phone over so the light is not beaming, and listen to something. And then hopefully that helps you drift off. Some people are like, oh, I need my TV on. No, you don't need your TV on. You just need some noise. And so that's another way people can help hear some noise, hear the sound very lightly, but not have to see that light glaring from the TV or the phone. And then if you feel like you've tried everything and it's still not working, then I encourage people to go see their primary care physician if possible to talk about sleep apnea or insomnia. And then tip number 5, care for yourself or self-care. Making time for mental health breaks. That can just be like 5-minute breaks from work, 2-minute breaks from your family if possible, making time for a mental health break, and just do some breathing exercises. We want to breathe from our belly and not from our chest. So if you put your right hand over your chest and your left hand over your abdomen or belly, and you feel like you're breathing more from your chest, then that's an indicator that there's some type of stress going on. So sometimes you can sit there and reframe or change up your breathing so that you're breathing from your belly. That can be a good way of taking a little break, or saying a prayer, talking to yourself, exercising, providing wellness. So we've been talking about wellness all morning. Managing your stress, physical health, getting up, moving around, whatever that looks like. Pick some exercise that you really like to do. If you hate running, don't sign up to go running. If you like dancing or moving around, do Zumba, do Refet. In your living room, do something that you actually enjoy doing. Because when you pick a physical activity that you actually want to do, you're more likely to stick to it. So don't try to make yourself like an exercise, because sometimes that can have the alternative impact that you want it to have. And then finding work-life balance. Again, we talked about this in the occupational pursuit of finding balance for pleasure as well as to work. All work and no play makes people very grumpy. So finding a little enjoyments outside of your work, finding little enjoyments in your just everyday life, whatever that looks like for you. And time management. I think we talked about that a little bit before we got on the call, managing our time to the best of our ability. Planning ahead, thinking about what we need, because when we don't manage our time, that adds stress to our lives, and sometimes stress to other people as well. And then technology and self-care. Technology is awesome. It's a great thing when used effectively. When I think about social media, I think about notifications coming on our phone. When we can control our notifications, when we can not be in our room, just on our phones or on our laptops all night, then that can help promote self-care. You sometimes have to physically move your phone and computer away from you, put it in a dresser or charge your phone in the kitchen, whatever you need to do to get it out of your space can be good. Taking social media breaks, logging off for a little bit, removing the app from your phone can be helpful as well. Unless your job is social media, then that may be hard. And then when you do want to take some time off the grid, just let people know that, hey, I'm just taking some time off, like people who you trust, so they don't come looking for you. So that's a big disclaimer. Oh yeah, aromatherapy is good too. Yep. So yeah, and if you, for some reason, you don't have blue light blocking glasses, if you look away, so the 20-20-20 rule, looking away 20 feet for 20 seconds and just kind of sitting there, that can give your eyes a little exercise break too. So if you don't have like these glasses have it, you can look away, look somewhere else for a little bit, and that can give your eyes a little boost of health too. So good point about the computer and the blue light. And then, yeah, those are my 5 tips that I almost skipped over. And these are just the resources to get, and a blur of all the different sources that I utilize to make this happen. So yeah, I am so thankful for my time with y'all today. Did anybody have any questions or extra comments? I'm glad y'all stuck around.
Any questions or comments? Thank you so much, Alyssa, for sharing with us such a wonderful wealth of information. It really was great. And of course, I don't, it goes without saying that I really enjoyed this conversation. And I think that we can, definitely continue the conversation, because I know that there's still so much more to discuss. But does anybody have any final comments or questions for Alyssa before we conclude the presentation?
Yes, I wanted to say this, Tim. I'm in Kansas City. Thank you for taking the opportunity to prepare such a powerful display of information and putting it together. The time that you put in there, the details, wonderful, dynamic, put it all together. Thank you all for allowing me to be a part. I feel blessed to be a part of it. Dr. Chevelle, thank you again. What a blessing to be a part of this conversation, meaningful conversation that needs to be had more often, frequently. And thanks again.
Thank you. All the way from Kansas. Nice.
Anybody else have anything they would like to say? All right. Well, then join me then in saying thank you to Alyssa for joining us today and just giving such a wonderful presentation. I'm so thankful that you took time to be with us today and sharing all this. I hope that you will decide to come back and share more with us, because this is a topic I don't think we can get tired of, right? This is something that we need to continue having discussion about. And perhaps we need to piecemeal it, meaning, taking one dimension at a time, because there's so much to just talk about in each dimension, and to talk about them all at the same time. We can't hit all of those different pieces that go in there. So perhaps you will consider coming back and kind of doing a series with us to talk about all these different dimensions in a different kind of way. We can talk offline about that, but I hope that you will consider that. All right, so I am now going to turn our session over to Jamie McKinney, who is our secretary, and allow her to share with you before we conclude our session today. Take it away, Jamie.
Thank you again for the presentation. It was really good. So I'll just take a couple of minutes for the sake of time. One of the things that we do at the end of our meetings is kind of do a call to service. I know that we are going to post this, and I want to say thank you for everybody who's present, but I do want to say that for the Central Texas Association of Black Social Workers, we are looking for those who want to serve our community. And I know right now the catchment area that we have is a little bit widespread, which is a good thing. But we do want folks who are ready to serve to come and to join us. We're actually about to start our new year, is that correct? Regardless, yeah. And so we want to have people who will be just as dedicated as our leadership, I don't know, square, pentagon, whatever it's been for the last while, to help us grow and help us to touch people, touch the Black communities, different communities in Central Texas and surrounding out in a very meaningful and thoughtful, and I think the words that were used earlier by Mr. Willis and then by Dr. Chevelle, in a compassionate and personable way, and that's what we want to be. And so we are looking for members. If you would like to join, we'll post in the chat. What we'll do is we'll post our contact information. We do want everybody who is on the meeting to list their contact information so we can reach out to you. With the Association of Black Social Workers, with the Central Texas Association of Black Social Workers, just know on a national level, you do have to be of African ancestry to join. We do have a short application that we'll look at and get processed. And we'll have information we can email you information on what our dues look like. And as we are growing, we know a couple of things that we want to do, but we do want people who will have that voice to help us define focus and continue to grow, because that's what we need. And just this conversation in itself has shown, I think, one of the things, and again, I'm gonna promise you, I'm not gonna take too long because we are losing in the Baylor game by 4 right now. My husband texted me because, anyways. I just wanted to say most of the things that we talked about just right now take me back to when we were founding and the things that we wanted to do. And I don't know if Marie or Dr. Chevelle kind of felt that, but the spirit of the conversation was the spirit of what we had when we were like, where is our focus going to be? Where does it lie? Where do we want to touch the communities? Where do we want to have growth and change and enhance us as a people? And all of those things just came out. I mean, during the conversation, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm either having flashbacks, goosebumps, something, because it was amazing. And just to be able to have that conversation, but then to put it to work, for us to be able to put the walk to our talk. So that is our goal. And if you would like some more, please reach out to us. Dr. Chevelle put our email in the chat. Thank you, Mr. Willis and Ms. Petty, for putting your information in, and we'll reach out to you. I don't know if I missed anything else. Go ahead, Dr. Chevelle, if I did.
Thank you, Jamie. You did a fabulous job as always.
Well, will you send out this to those who are in attendance? Will you
Absolutely. Yeah, you will. Yeah, if you want to get a copy of the video, we post it, online. Thank you, Marie. She handles our, ability to kind of cast this out so that people can get access to it and view it, especially if they were not able to attend because they are at the Baylor game today, they can go ahead and take a look at it online. And then of course, if you contact us, we can also send it to you. So you are no worries, you'll be able to get this and definitely share this with you so that you can go back and refer back to this wonderful information that was shared with us today. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us. This is something that we do. We have these monthly meetings and we do take a break, and we're coming up on our break. So our breaks start in December. So our next and final for the year meeting is going to be next month, and we'll definitely share information about that to you once we get it going. And so after November, we take a little bit of a break and we don't resume again until February. And during that time, we kind of like to prepare ourselves for the upcoming year. So Alyssa, I will pass my recommendation over to our chair of membership and engagement, because she actually handles all of our virtual webinars. And I will let her know what I had opened my mouth and said on this call so that she can take that into consideration for our next year's agenda. But, whether you are in Texas or not in Texas, you are always welcome to join us. This is not something that you have to feel like because I'm not a part of, I'm not in the Central Texas area that I cannot participate. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. This is information that, we're trying to put out there that is beneficial. It doesn't matter what region of the world you're in. So definitely, come and join us, share with us, discuss with us, share your insights and experience. We love that, because it doesn't really matter that you're not in Central Texas. If you want to join us. So when we do share information, do not hesitate to share it with your networks, because we want to be able to impart to as many people as we possibly can. So with that being said, thank you all for joining our session today, and we hope to see you next time. Take care.